This week's Torah section discusses blessings and curses. First of all, the Jewish people come to Israel and they get on these two big mountains. One is called Har Grizim and the other one is called Har Eval. They're near Shechem, and they have this whole ceremony of the Kohanim and the Leviim being in the valley between the two mountains. And they turn to one mountain and they say, blessed will you be the person that keeps the Torah. And it doesn't discuss specifically or generally Torah, but it discusses specific things which are not in the parameters of our lecture today, to talk about why these things were chosen to be the things which are mentioned, that if you do this, you're going to get blessed, and if you do this, you're going to get the opposite, etc., etc. Then afterwards, we have a whole long rampage of what's going to happen to the Jewish people if they don't keep the Torah properly. First it says all the different blessings they're going to get if they keep the Torah, and then chas v'sholem if they don't, what's going to happen to them. And it's very, very, how would I say this? It's not for the general public. It has a lot of very nasty details about what's going to happen to the Jewish people. And the question is, when we talk about blessings and we talk about curses, what are we talking about? What do we mean? Now, there's a Gemara in the tractate called Megillah on page 30 that says an interesting thing. In about 10 days, we're going to have Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. And the Gemara says that the rabbis made it a custom that we should read about all the curses which are mentioned in this parsha, in Parshas Ki Tovo, because when we read them at the end of the year, we say to ourselves, all these problems, all these curses, that's last year. This year, we're going to start a new page. We're going to turn over our life, and we're going to have blessings. So we read the curses, and the lashon of the way the Gemara expresses this, shetichla shana, that the year should end, v'kiloteha, and its curses. V'teichal shana, the new year should start, ubirchosel, and its blessings. So we read it in order to get rid of all the difficulties we've had and start the new year on the right foot, as we would say. And I was in Ashkelon for many years, so we had two Batei Knesset, two synagogues. One was the Ashkenaz synagogue, which I usually daven, and on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur I used to say lectures and sermons in the Sephardi synagogue, and I used to daven with them also. And a major part of their prayers are different piyutim, which are like sort of psalms, the type of songs, poems really, which discuss that the year's difficulties, the year's curses should end, and we should start a new year. And they have a very nice tune for it, and they sing end of bad, beginning of good, end of curses, beginning of blessings, and it's very nice to sit there and participate in the prayers. But the question arises, how do we get rid of the curses so easily? If I could just say a few psukim and get rid of the curses, so then that's great. But it doesn't really make any sense, because I've read about these curses in this portion, this chapter of the Torah. How does that affect us that we should not have any more curses and we should start the year with blessings? So we could always say that this is some mystical, supernatural power, that by saying it, it helps. And we do believe in supernatural powers, etc., etc. But since I'm a Litvak, you know what Litvak is? We have different types of sects in our Orthodox community. We have those that are more mystical. They are the Hasidim, and they're more the logic, those that deal with the physical world on a logical level, and we're called the Litvaks. We want things to be understood according to logic. We know that there is more out there, but we have to base our Judaism, our relationship to Judaism, our understanding of Judaism on logic, to understand why it works and how it works. So therefore, what I'm going to discuss a little bit today in this lecture, this shir, whatever, how does one rate blessings? And how does one get rid of curses? And how does reading this portion, this Shabbos, which we're going to all have a lot of kavanah if we listen to it, get rid of those curses. Let's start a happy and a blessed year. How do we do that? So obviously, in order to do that, we have to understand what is a blessing and what is a curse. How does one get a blessing? What do you do to get a blessing? Sam, what do you say? How do you get a blessing?
You say prayer, or what is it called?
A bracha. Oh, okay. That's not bad. By saying a bracha, you get a bracha. When you say one of these little prayers before you eat, after you eat, etc., that's a bracha, and that gets you a blessing. But still, we don't understand how that works. This is also on a mystical level. You say a bracha, you get bracha. But why does it work? How does it work? Anybody else have an idea? Something, within the realm of logic. Go ahead.
Doing a good deed.
Okay. There's no question about the fact that doing a good deed is a good thing, but it still doesn't explain. The Ramban, one of our medieval commentaries, says it doesn't really make sense. Why do you get blessed if you do a good deed? What relationship does that good deed have to do with you? We have a pharmacy in Detroit. So one of the guys walked in, they bought one of these lottery tickets. They won $1 million, right? We only got $20,000 out of it, but the guy won $1 million. Now, because he did a good deed, therefore he won the lottery for $1 million. What does one thing have to do with the other? Yeah, what do you say?
The beracha being the beracha is like a mitzvah, good mitzvah, and avera, good avera. Okay, the one blessing they say is because they're not blessing.
Okay.
They say thank you Hashem.
A person who is good continues doing good deeds. And if you do good deeds, so then, again, we might say that you rank getting a blessing. But let me move you a little bit more in the right direction. The word blessing in Hebrew is called bracha. Bet, Reish, Chof. Bracha. There's another word which is very similar to this, and it just has one extra letter in it, a yud. It's called brecha. You have bracha, which is blessing, and brecha, which is a spring, which is a well. And the Gemara and the Rabbi say that a person that does a bracha, person that thanks God for what he has, he is causing the well of goodness to flow towards him. So bracha means a blessing, and brecha means a spring. Now, there's another word which has the same letters, and that is berach. Berach means a knee, right? In the old days, in order to drink from a spring, have you ever gone on one of these long hikes, and then you come to one of these springs of fresh water, so everybody jumps into the water, or at least bends over and starts drinking from the water? So that's what they used to do. They used to bend down to drink from the well. So berach, which means to kneel, which means a knee, and bracha, which means that you are kneeling to God, connects you to the brecha, which is the spring which gives life and substance. You like it? No. It's not mine, but it's all right. Now, have you ever traveled to Eilat? Okay. No, if you do, you should go there. It's very nice. Even though it's a halachic problem, it is Eretz Yisrael, not Eretz Yisrael. But for you fellows, it's okay. You can go to Eilat. On the way to Eilat, you travel through a desert. And the desert is bleak. And you're traveling for kilometers after kilometers. And I drive down there because I don't, go to the airport and fly. I drive down there. And then suddenly, you come to an oasis of green vegetation. You come to trees. The place is called Yotfosa. And the place is blooming. It's beautiful. And a lot of our produce, especially now in Shemitah, comes from there. So what happened? Why was it all the way there it was bleak and desolate, and suddenly it's blooming? What made the difference? No, come on. Water. An oasis in the middle of the desert. Why does it bloom? Why do people go to these oases? Because the water, the spring, is the source of life. Therefore, when we are looking for a bracha, when we are looking for life and substance, we are looking to connect to the fountainhead of the fountain of youth, the fountain of life, the fountain of existence. Now, what does this mean? How do we connect to blessing? How do we connect to the fountain of water which gives us life through a bracha? Now, the thing is like this. There are people that have content to them, and there are people that are all a big facade. Right? You've heard of the paper tiger? Over here in Israel, they have the paper police car. Right? I don't know if they still have them. They used to put on the side of the road a cardboard figure which looked like a policeman sitting in his patrol car, so that the people, when they're speeding down, as they see it from a couple of kilometers away, there's a policeman there, and they slow down, and then they get closer and closer and closer, then they see it's only a paper policeman, and then they start flying again. But the idea is that there are things with real substance, and there are things which are just a facade. How do we live our life? Do we live our life with substance, with meaning, with a direction, or do we live a superficial life?
First one.
We try to. We're supposed to. Anybody here from Hollywood?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a friend of mine that grew up on Sunset Strip. He used to be a psychologist there. So he told me, he learned in UCLA, he cannot walk down Sunset Strip. Why? Because he knows what's going on in the back alleys over there. What?
All the sheiks there.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of other things besides the sheiks that are there, but plenty of other things. But people are burning themselves out, right? For a little bit of superficial pleasure, for a little bit of a high, they're destroying themselves. Hollywood is all about how many famous actors committed suicide, or if they didn't commit suicide, they drove themselves to such a, they had such terrible, terrible lives. Why? Because money is not blessing, fame is not blessing, even enjoying yourself is not blessing. Only if you have substance, only if you have a true meaning to your life, then can you really, really enjoy life and really have a blessing. So the idea is that before we start the new year, we have to get our priorities straight. What are we looking for? What type of life do we want to live? So if we read the brachos and the klolos, now what does the word klola mean? A curse. What does the word curse? The word curse is kal, light. Something which has no substance is kal, it's light. It's a lightweight. A person that's a lightweight has a life of klola, of difficulties, of all kinds of problems which you can't solve. They're looking for substance. They're looking for meaning in their life. So therefore, kolola is kal, no substance and no meaning. Orur, it says orur, person should be cursed. What is curse? Orur is from the same words as avir, right? You're full of hot air, right? If you're full of hot air, you're going to have a pretty lousy life. But if you have brocha, brecha, you connect to the source of life and the fountain of youth, so then you're going to have a good life. So this is what the rabbis mean. And this is very important. Whenever we read the rabbis, they have a superficial meaning and they have a deeper meaning. Our job is to understand the deeper meaning of the rabbis. There are many, many examples about this, which we don't have time to talk about. There's a whole book written by the Maralmi Prague, Be'er HaGolah, to explain difficult pieces of the rabbis, which they seem to be saying strange things, and he explains what the deeper meaning is. But all that being said, we have to start the new year on the right foot. Why? Because if we have our priorities, then we know where we're going and what we're doing. How do we do that? We read the brachos and klalos and we see, look, you have life in front of you. You can either enjoy it, you can have meaning, or you can suffer. It's up to you to decide. Once you decide that, then we can start the new year. All the difficulties, all the problems which we have. Somebody told me there's supposed to be some movie that a guy could communicate with the future and the past. So the son was speaking to the father 30 years earlier. So he speaks to him over a radio, ham radio, and he says to him, Dad, you died from cancer. You died of cancer. So he said, really? I died of cancer? So he said, you better stop smoking. So the guy throws out his pack of cigarettes, and he changes the future, and he lives, and he doesn't die of cancer. If we could do that, right, relearn from our mistakes retroactively and not do the things which are going to kill us, so then we'll have a much happier life. The thing ends off over there that the father and the son, they live happily ever after because of the fun. The son gave the father the hindsight to be able to not make the mistakes he wanted to make, or he didn't make it in life. We have to also have the ability to appreciate what's bringing us down, what's making our life not at the level where we really have substance to it. And by doing that, being able to start, and we're not going to be able to do everything, but take one thing at a time, one thing which we realize is bringing us down, one thing which we could do better, and then it's going to be possible for us to end off the curses, the emptiness, and start the blessing, a connection to the source of life. Now, there's one thing I'm going to tell you, which is just interesting aside. We were talking about going to learn in Baltimore. I studied in Baltimore near Israel many, many moons ago. Unfortunately, life has gone by. But when I first came to Baltimore, came at the age of 15 from Detroit, and I was going to a high school over there in Detroit, which, was a nice school, but nothing very special. So I came to Baltimore, and they had what was called Elul and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Elul, this month, we're blowing the shofar, and then they had Rosh Hashanah. Now, I was used to davening, if I davened a Shemona Esrei for 3 or 4 minutes, that was a long Shemona Esrei, right? And over there, on Rosh Hashanah, they daven Shemona Esrei for 3/4 of an hour. An hour they can daven Shemona Esrei. Okay, it's a new Shemona Esrei, it's longer. But what are you doing for 3/4 of an hour davening? So the first time was very difficult for me. But then I started thinking to myself, if I'm going to have to wait around for an hour anyway, I might as well do something. So I started looking into the text. I started trying to understand the text and the deeper understanding of the text. Then I started seeing, how can that relate to me? How can that help me change my life? And by doing that, I picked up tremendous insights. From those Shemona Esreis, the whole year I had insights to be able to improve my learning and my studying. This was sort of a meditation that I did. Even though, how can an hour Shemona Esrei? Okay, and not everybody can daven that. But at least take the time to meditate, to appreciate who you are and what you're doing, in order to be able to fix things up. I had a friend of mine, I do have a friend of mine, who works in Harvard. And he was working together with Elie Wiesel. probably all heard of Elie Wiesel. You know who he is? Elie Wiesel, everybody. He was a Holocaust survivor, wrote many books, won a Nobel Prize. At any rate, they worked together on the writings of different Hasidic rabbis. And there was one Hasidic rabbi which was called the Piaseczky Rebbe, who lived in Varsha. He was killed in Varsha in the destruction of the Varsha ghetto, and he was a tremendous educator. We have many books of his which are used for education to this day. Now, a few years ago, they were rebuilding the Varsha area of the ghetto, and the tractors unearthed certain cans, and in the cans there was Hebrew writing. So they took the Hebrew writing to rabbis, and they saw that they were writings of this Piaseczky Rebbe, and that he had written there very deep concepts about how to serve God. And that he had certain principles of meditation which he recommended for his students in order for them to be able to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, how do you connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? What? How can you connect to God? You have a radio, internet. How can you connect to God? So the rabbis tell us a very interesting thing. You connect to God by connecting to yourself. Every human being has a neshama, has a holy soul. This holy soul can lead him and raise him up to levels of an ability to relate to godliness, to holiness, to spirituality. So how do you find God? Right? You know that they say, peanuts, I searched for the enemy and I found him. And he is me, I'm the enemy. The other way around is also true. If I'm looking for God, how can I relate to God? Everybody has within him this neshama. This neshama gives him an ability to be able to feel godliness, to relate to godliness. So just like the spring which we get our water from, we have to bend down to it in order to be able to benefit from this cool water. We have to be able to bow ourselves down, relate that there is a God and we have a soul, and if we look at ourselves and what our real deep desires are, we can come to understand God himself. We can come to relate to God himself. So the idea of this period of time, the next couple of weeks, is to try to figure out what our priorities are, what's going to make us really happy, what's going to make us, give us a really good life, and then try to implement a few things which will make us better. That is the way we'll get rid of the old curses, and we will begin to get blessings in our life. Now, there's one more thing that I wanted to tell you in respect to this. In this week's Parsha, we talk about bringing Bikurim. Do you know what Bikurim is? What? Okay, I'll explain in short. It says, I'll read a couple of psukim. I mean, this is supposed to be a Chumash here, so therefore I'm going to read a little bit of Chumash so we can say that this is a Chumash here. It says, V'hoya ki tavo el haaretz, when you'll come to Israel, and we all have been able to come to Israel. We have to appreciate that. Do you know how many generations wanted to come to Israel and they couldn't make it? How many people died coming to Israel? Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, one of the great poets of the Jewish people, he wrote poem after poem about coming to Israel. And they say that finally, at the end of his life, he managed to get to Israel. He came to the Western Wall, and there he was killed by an Arab. So I'm not sure this really happened, but that's what they say. But they say he accomplished what he wanted to do. He's willing to die for it, and then he made it to Israel. But we don't have to die. We have to live in Eretz Yisrael. We have to appreciate being in Eretz Yisrael, what it does for us, the opportunities it gives for us, and we have to be able to use them properly. So it says, "V'hoya ki savol eretz asher Hashem Elokecha noisen lecha nachala, v'yirishta v'yashafta bo." And you will inherit the land. V'lokachta meireshis kol pri ha'adama. And you will take from the first fruits of all the things which grow in your land, and you are going to bring them to the temple, and you're going to give them to the priest in the temple, and say, God, I'm happy I'm a Jew. God, I'm happy you've protected the Jewish people for thousands of years. God, we appreciate what you're doing for us. And since we appreciate what you're doing for us, therefore continue to do good things for us. So from over here, we learn a very important principle. Do you want God to give us blessings? You want God to be good to us? Appreciate what you have. Some people, no matter what they have, they don't appreciate it. It's never enough for them. You know where the highest rate of suicide is?
Where?
In which level, economic level of,
The highest.
right, of
Japanese high school students.
Japanese high school students. Okay. At any rate, I'm not sure about Japanese.
It's the world's highest suicide rate.
Yeah, okay. Why? Because they have their whole life set out for them.
If they fail one test, their life is ruined.
Their life is ruined. Okay,
Wow.
that's pretty bad. But at any rate, statistically, the richer you are, the greater you have a chance of committing suicide. The poor guys, they're not going to commit suicide because they're too busy fighting for their lives. But the rich ones, they don't appreciate what they have. No matter what they have, they were born with a gold spoon in their mouths, and therefore they don't appreciate what they have. There's some story about some guy, song, about if I would be Richard Corey or something like that. If I'm too old for you guys, there's a guy, Richard Corey, he's the richest guy in town, he's the most successful, and in the last stanza, he committed suicide. Never heard of Richard Corey, really? I'm really out of date. At any rate, so the more you have doesn't necessarily mean the more you're happy. If you don't appreciate what you have, so then no matter what you have, you're never going to be happy. The first step of having happiness, the first step of having blessing, is appreciate what HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you. As long as you appreciate it, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you appreciate it, let me give you some more. If you don't appreciate it, God says, I'm giving this guy things. What does he need it for? He doesn't appreciate it anyway. So the first thing the Jewish people do when they come to Israel is they go and they take the first fruit and they bring it to the priest and they say, thanks for everything that you're doing for us. Now, the last portion in the previous portion, the last thing which is written in the previous portion, is all about Amalek. Have you heard about Amalek? Do you know who Amalek is? Amalek is the people that are trying to kill the Jewish people all the time. If they're the Germans in Nazi Germany, or if they were Haman Harosha in Persia, in Iran, right, or even the Iranians today possibly, Amalek are the ones that are trying to destroy the Jewish people. What do they want from the Jewish people? Why do they want to kill us? Why did the Nazis want to kill the Jewish people? What?
Ideology?
Yes, what was the ideology, do you know?
We have God on our side.
Okay, so what do they have against God?
He's always with us.
So why should they want to kill us? They should join us.
They feel like their mission is to kill us.
Why? Why is their mission to kill us?
Because God sent them to kill us. Like,
All right, but what is their rationalization? What is the rationalization of the Nazis? They wrote it. Mein Kampf, it's written by Hitler himself, and many of their decisions. What?
That we were impure and they wanted to purify the species.
What was impure about us? Got it. Very good. What's your name? Asher what? Cowan. If you read the Nazi writings, the Jewish people brought the Christian Judaic philosophy of morals. Morals. That's why they hate us, because we have morals. They don't want a world of morals. They want a world of power as right, right? What is the expression? Might makes right, right? That's so. They do not want to have a higher power which dictates. The Amalekim, the Gemara says, When they killed the Jewish people, they tore off their bris milah, and we won't explain what that is. You should know what it is by yourself. And they threw them up into heaven and said, "We don't want you in this world. God, get out of here. We don't want God in this world. We don't want morals in this world." And it's interesting, the Nazis didn't read the Medrash probably, and they say the same thing. We don't want God in this world. We don't want morals in this world. Thank you very much. So now, the last thing which is talked about in the previous portion is a lack of appreciation. The Amolekim, they said, we don't want God. We don't want to be thankful to anybody. We don't want anybody to dictate what's right and what's wrong. We don't want any morals. What does the Torah answer to them? The Torah answers to them and says to them, because of the fact that we want to eradicate Amaleki philosophy, because we want to eradicate Nazi philosophy, we want to create a situation where a person realizes that the world has morals, the world has God, and we have to appreciate everything that God gives to us. Even though it might have happened 1,000 years ago, we have to appreciate it, and especially what we have now, we have to appreciate. Now, over here, I'm going to tell you a little play on words, which is very interesting. It says over here, "V'lokachta mireishis kol pri ha'adama." You should take from all of the first fruit. Now, halachically speaking, that's not correct. You take bikurim only from the Shivat Haminim. Do you know what the Shivat Haminim are? There are what? The 7 fruits which are specifically identified with Israel, with the land of Israel. So we have grapes, we have pomegranates, we have dates, we have figs, we have what? Wheat, barley, olives, right? Those are the 7. So it says that you take from all, but it's not all. It's only from the 7, not from all of them. So why does it say from all? So I'm going to explain this on 2 levels. I'm going to explain this on one level of a more simplistic explanation, and then I'm going to explain it to you in a little more, how would we say this? Hints which we take out of the Chumash. We know, and this is something which we have to appreciate, whether a person is healthy or chas v'sholom sick, whether a person is wealthy or chas v'sholom poor, these things depend on a spiritual flow from God. I'll tell you, I had a little bout with a little bit of a physical health issue. Nothing very dangerous, but it was very inconvenient. So there was a period of time that I had to take certain medicines to take care of certain things, and my body wasn't functioning properly. We'll leave it at that. Well, during that period of time, I appreciated God's creation of the human being. If we appreciated how many different systems have to function, and if any little thing is not exactly in place, how much misery that can cost us, we would really appreciate ourselves much more. There's a blessing which we say after you go to the bathroom. It's called Asher Yatzaras Adam. So when I was a young boy, I remember still in Detroit, so I had a girl that lived next door to us. And I was going to a religious school, and she wasn't going to a religious school. So she asked me about different things that we learned in school. So I told her that we learned in the school that after you go to the bathroom, you have to say this blessing. And she cracked up. What? After you go to the bathroom, you have to make a blessing? Why, you're crazy. She was really ticked off. What? She was Jewish, yeah. In fact, later she married a friend of mine. At the end, a friend of mine and he killed her and committed suicide. I don't ask. It was a very bad end over there. Yeah. Some other time I'll tell you that story also. At any rate, so she was really So I was thinking to myself, it's like very funny. You go to the bathroom and you make a bracha. But then you go to any, what is it called? Someone that takes care, a doctor for if you have to go to the bathroom, what is it called?
Proctologist?
What?
Proctologist?
No. A urologist. If you ever go to a urologist and you find out what's going on in life, so you'll find out how much is dependent on so little. And then, after this bout that I had, and things went back to normal again, which wasn't necessarily going to happen, I was so happy every time I say this, I share Yotzar, I say it with such kavanah, you have no idea. Why? Because you have to appreciate that everything comes from God. Now, the rabbis tell us that when the temple was built, so it was possible to find which spiritual source was the source of every different thing which existed in the world. So therefore, if you wanted to plant something in Israel, even though it grew only in, let's say, in India, but you could find the source of this plant in the temple, and you could plant on that source whatever you wanted. I don't know what grows in India, whatever. So everything comes from this source, the temple. Everything emanates from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore, when we say Mireish, it's called Priya Adama, 7 in Kabbalah always represents the 7 spheres which runs the world. There are 7 spheres which we're not going to go into. And when we give from these 7 fruits, we are affecting all the different sources for all fruits which exist in the world. So Mireish is called Priya Adama, even though it's only 7, it's from all the fruits. But there's one more thing over here. This Mireish's Kol has 3 letters which really shouldn't be here. It should say V'lokachta Reishis Priya Adama. What is Mireish's Kol? So we have the letter Mem, Chof, Lamed. Mem, Chof, Lamed, these 3 letters are very, very important to us. Now let me explain to you why. It says that Bilam wanted to curse the Jewish people. Bilam wanted to curse the Jewish people. So the Gemara asks, how could he do it? Because there's a time when God is angry at the world, and if he would make a curse at that time, he could be able to curse the Jewish people. So the Gemara says it's only 1 second. How can you do it? So the Gemara said he'd say one word. What is the word he would say? Kol aim. Chof, lamed mem. Destroy them. Kol aim. Chof, lamed mem. Over here we have chof, lamed mem also. So the chof, lamed mem is the word which is used for destruction. What did God do? He changed these letters around, and instead of having kol aim, he had melech. The same letters, chof, lamed, mem, if you turn them around, they become mem, lamed, chof, they become melech. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu switched around from kol aim, destruction, from a curse, to melech, to control over the world. So therefore, when we say these things, we have the ability to change from destruction, from curse, to blessing. Now, over here we have an interesting thing. There are 3 major organs which the Torah or the rabbis relate our actions to. We have the mind, we have the heart, and we have the kloyot, the kidneys, whatever. The mind is intellect, the heart is emotion, and the kloyot, or the kidneys, are basic physical desires. Now, how do we run the world? Some people run the world and themselves. The basic physical desires, they dictate what kind of emotions they have. And at the end, they have the philosophy: eat, live, and be merry, for tomorrow we will die. If you want to have a hedonistic life, so the kidneys will supply the philosophy. If you have chof, lamed, mem, chof, kloyot, kidneys, lamed, lev, heart, mem, moach, mind. So if you have the kloyot dictating your emotions, dictating your mind, that's destruction. That's Hollywood, that's Sunset Strip, going after your physical desires. What is the way to really live your life? Melech. The mind has to decide what's really good for you. then the emotion has to relate to that. It's not good enough to know that smoking will kill you. A lot of people know that smoking will kill you, and they keep on smoking. It's only when it becomes something that they can appreciate, they understand. I used to smoke many, many years ago. So one Passover, I was given a book about halacha and medicine, and there were 200 pages about all the different things that smoking does to you. I finished reading that. I stopped in the middle of a pack. I still didn't have the pack, Broadway hundreds, right? I stopped smoking because it wasn't just a mental understanding. I appreciated it. I felt, I'm killing myself. Let's stop smoking. So if the mind dictates what the heart believes, then it's possible to live your life in appreciation and in happiness. So therefore, that's what we say. Appreciate where you get what you get from. Understand it. And don't go after your physical desires to make your decisions for you, but go after the mental understanding of what's good for you. Then the bracha will come, and the klola will be turned around, the koleim will be turned around to a bracha. And I once told this in a different synagogue in New York. So the rabbi said to me, yeah, of course. The Chasam Sofer says, what's the parsha after Kisovo? It says Nitzovim. You're going to stand strong. Vayelech, you're going to continue living your life in the proper fashion. Ha'azinu, you will listen to God. V'zois habrocha. And then you will have the blessing that you need. I wish you all a good year, that there should be a lot of blessing. You should be able to overcome the things which are holding you down. And we should all have a wonderful year, Be'ez Hashem.